Welcome back to Momentous Struggle, a Star Wars Shatterpoint podcast. On today's episode, we are going to be breaking down our thoughts on how the first struggle impacts the games and how different strategies that we like to utilize when playing against that. So let's go ahead and jump into it. As always, I'm joined by Aubrey. How we doing today, Aubrey?
Oh man, I've been spending the last 2 days cleaning out our garage, which is full of 6 people's worth of stuff because of my current family situation. Not everyone who lives here stuff is in there, so it's been well, we're starting. I guess it's not that early, but I'm already getting through this one, and I got another one waiting for me. That's how well it's going for me, Todd.
And you're doing the October pumpkin beer thing, so it's all right. It's like your pumpkin spice, but not pumpkin spice.
Mm, I, I gotta be a basic white girl sometimes, Todd. It's
It's all
okay.
right. Well, I'll allow it.
Hey, I
Yeah,
like pumpkin pie. Come on, come
fair
on.
enough. Fair enough. I'm an IPA guy, so it's like I'm gonna sit there and stick with my IPAs. It's like I just can't, but I get it. It's fine. I'll allow it. I'll allow it.
There are only so many options in Arizona for porters and stouts. Nobody drinks them here. I mean, this I would call it a dark place, but it's really a very light place.
Yeah. No, there's a lot like I said, there's a lot of IPAs is kind of like the big thing in beers anyway nowadays. So I get it. I mean, I'm going with just vodka diet Coke for me today. That's so it's been I did a family vacation, so for me I'm drinking too.
Hey, just before we got on, you were telling me what a
No,
great time you
it
had. Come
was good. It was good,
on.
but still going, hanging out with kids in a small area can sometimes have its stressful moments, but overall it wasn't bad.
Yeah, you did say 200 square feet of living space
Yeah,
for five people. Wait, how many kids do you
yeah,
have again? I'm like, how
five
many people?
people. Yep, five
Five
people. I
five
got three
people.
of them.
Yeah.
I got three minions.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, all right, all right, but we're doing all right. We're
Uh,
recording this on a Monday. It's okay.
It is. Yeah. So I know we played one of our league games because our local LGS is running a league, which is really I like the way that they set this up. So it's basically there's only 8 of us in the league, but we're playing 6 games throughout the entire course of it. So you're pretty much playing everybody except for one person in the league, which is kind of cool. So we're getting a lot of games in that way. You and I played one. You were playing Mother Maul, and I was playing as Frankie likes to call them, the Asthma Brothers, the Vader Grievous. So I've been
Yep,
playing
the Super Asthma Bros.
Super Asthma Bros. So yes, and basically it really came down to I think I won struggle 1, you won struggle 2, and then struggle 3 was pretty brutal for you because I got those the center not column but a row. So all 3 of those I was able to pull it, and I controlled all 3 of them at the start of struggle 3. So I scored 4 points there, and then the second struggle I was able to activate Vader and went across the board with his Vader movement and then a regular movement and just murdered whoever was sitting on 1 point and scored another 4 points plus a Vader murder momentum token. So it was pretty. That was a pretty brutal. Like I ended up winning that struggle in 2 activations. So that was pretty brutal for you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of forgot how that ended. That's how bad it was. I just remembered that it was really bad. So thanks for letting me relive that one,
Just
Todd. But
grind that
yeah,
one in a little there for you.
yeah. I mean, it is one of those things where if you get to be in the position where you're choosing what struggle 3 is going to be, you're not every time, because sometimes it's just bad for you, but you're always able to pick what is most advantageous to you. And just because of how I don't remember which card we flipped over for Struggle 2, but you just had a nice spread of units all throughout that center line.
Yeah.
So I mean that's just what happens sometimes. I
Yeah, I mean
mean,
it was the
I,
perfect card for me, and like just yeah, it was a perfect storm for unfortunately for you.
Yeah, yeah. I do have to say, so I am used to trying to talk positives because I know some people are already tired of hearing, oh, Vader Grievous won again. Oh, but I have to say, so usually when I've played other squads against Vader Grievous, everyone's dead.
Yeah.
Everyone has been wounded at least once, a lot of them twice. Like you're likely to be close to like, am I about to lose a primary here?
Hmm.
Even when you're not playing Maul. And with Mother Talzin and Maul, I never felt that. I mean, aside from yes, you flipped over the perfect card and Struggle 3 was brutal, but the fight never felt brutal
Yeah.
because Mother Talzin's life drain did a lot of work against Vader. If I remember right, didn't you only have 4 wounds that whole? I know we recorded it. I don't remember, but it was a
Yeah.
very low number. I'm used to Vader dishing out at least 7 or 8 wounds over the course of a game. Like Vader Grievous pile
No, no,
usually has.
I think I was. Let me go back. I can go. I think I got quite a bit, but you were able to sit there and really kind of do a lot. Because I was able to take out your supports pretty easily. But no, it might have been about 4 because I don't think I even injured. I don't think I even wounded Maul or Talzin. So I think it was only 4.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, so no, and I'm used to Vader just dishing out wounds for lunch every single time. That list is usually just a beating, like you're
Mhm.
practically wounding someone with every activation, especially in struggles 2 and 3. And yes, you took me out, but I never felt like every other game I've played against Vader Grievous, it has felt very one-sided.
Yeah.
Like you were just going in, beating on everyone, and we are just at your mercy. With the Mother Maul list, I don't. We just talked about how brutal it was, and the whole game, other than that card flipping over, I never felt down and out
Yeah.
like I have with other lists. So
Yeah. No, you weren't.
there's
You weren't
something to be
really out of
said.
it. You definitely weren't out of it. It just that. Yeah. That this I pulled the perfect card for struggle 3 because I won one, you won 2, and then and yeah, that was the perfect card for struggle 3. I think that had more to do with it than anything else. Was just that, yep, I pulled the perfect card and I was in the perfect position, and being able to flip Vader on that second activation, just be able to sit there and take you out too, was kind of like it was a bad run. It was just a bad run for you on that third struggle. But other than that, I mean, yeah, I was I was sweating it a little bit. I thought Talzin was going to sit there and definitely do some work for you there. So it was a pretty good one. But you also played a second league game as well. And I forget, you were playing against Samson on that one? Was that who you played?
Yeah. So, well, not Samson. His name is Chris. He's
Yeah.
the player we talked to
After our
after
game. Yeah.
our league after our game came over. So, sounds like he's played these games before, but maybe relatively new to Shatterpoint. It sounds like he's been doing the hot. He's got the same problem that most of you have. He's got to get everything painted before he can play with it. And I'm over here and I put gray plastic on the table. I'm a pleb. I don't know any better. I'm just gonna put it on there and play and have fun. So sounds like he's been working on getting everything painted and perfect before. Which hey, shout out to him. His painting looks phenomenal. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying he's doing a bad job there, but yeah, our game. So I'm gonna kind of skip. I'm not gonna talk about Struggle 1 because there was a lot of things that are emblematic of what we're gonna talk about that I'm gonna use as examples in our main discussion.
Hmm.
So I'm not gonna talk too much about Struggle 1. Just that it was very much a lot of parody till a certain moment, and then I was able to take the first struggle, and then as is wont to happen. It feels like generally whoever picks the card for Struggle 2 also tends to win Struggle 2,
Yeah.
just because you are able to make very optimal decisions based on where all your units are. So it didn't feel that surprising to me that he won Struggle 2 because he flipped over a card that he was able to control the points and keep the objectives up very handily. And then Struggle 3 was a nail biter. This was probably one of the longest games I've ever played because it's a league game, so we didn't have the critical uh, what is it,
Mission
critical
critical.
mission or
Mission critical. Yeah.
mission critical. I'm like, it's something like that, mission critical. So we didn't have that, so we just let it play out to its natural conclusion. But we were down to both of our sides of the struggle tracker were full to 2. Like that's how that's how tight of a game it was. And then I flipped over, I believe it was Mother Talzin. It was one of my, oh yeah, it was Mother Talzin because Maul even left the board. Like that's how much of an attrition battle we were playing. Maul had just done his last two Raw where I just threw him at, I think it was his Magna Guards to wound them, and then Maul left. But then I was able to flip over Mother Talzin, and that's what was able to get me enough points because I was able to move my units into place, and then she came in and took the last point. And in fact, like I could have won either with manipulating hand or her attack being successful. Like I
Nice.
basically Mother Talzin was exactly what I needed in that moment because I had the force. I was either just gonna manipulating hand, but I decided to throw the attack just to be extra extra safe. And yeah, so getting it was another one of those. Your primaries should do work when you activate them, and I had Mother Talzin at exactly the moment in Struggle 3 after this crazy back and forth we were having. I've never seen. Usually, Struggle 3 is pretty quick. This one, no, we had this back and forth all the way down.
Nice. I mean, it sounds like a fun game for sure. So that's pretty
Hmm.
awesome.
I had no idea who was going to win. I'll be perfectly honest. I was like, I know I'm usually favored if you win the first struggle for struggle 3, but this one I was like, this is anybody's game. It was cool. He was playing since sorry, I didn't say that. He was playing Grievous Dooku, but he had a very interesting list. No Kalani, no Kraken.
Yeah.
Instead, he was playing Savage for the beatdowns. And I gotta say, with Dooku's extra movement and being able to move Savage up into the fight, it looked pretty good. Like I
Nice.
haven't played that version, but it
Yeah,
looked pretty good.
I remember seeing him play his game because he was playing when we were doing our league match, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting decision. So it seemed, but it seemed to work out pretty good. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and just jump into the main topic. Then you wanted to talk about basically some struggle one stuff. So there was a couple of things that you're like, couple like the first points you were looking at was like going first versus going second, and I'm going to preface this by saying I know that I've listened to podcasts with Zion's Finest and definitely with Rogue Support where they talk about the going first for scoring first argument that is going on there. So I'm hoping I'm not going to be stealing any of their ideas because I know like you know how it is. We listen to each other's podcasts and we have those conversations and it's like a lot of times it's like. Am I regurgitating a point that they've already made, or is this actually an original point? So hopefully, I'm not stealing any of their thoughts and claiming it as my own. And if I do, I apologize.
Yeah, yeah. Full disclosure, everybody. I was supposed to write a bit more detail of show notes over the weekend, and then my house basically imploded as I had different different cooks in the kitchen trying to decide the best way to clean our garage and sort of run a garage sale, but not really. So I completely spaced it. So it's hot take city all the way down. And if we steal someone's content, I promise it's imitation is flattery, not theft, right?
Something like that. Something like that. But yeah, so you were. I mean, that's been an interesting argument of like the scoring first, like versus going first, and how it's you are almost. I know, and definitely in Zion's finest they were talking about how it is more advantageous to be that first person to score versus the first person to actually have the first activation. And so, what were your thoughts on that one though?
Uh, well, sadly, I was gonna kind of make the same point. So, coming into this game, I am used to just to talk about a little game theory. I have so much Magic experience. That's where I'm gonna be pulling my knowledge from. Sorry everybody if you're tired of this, but in Magic, going first is so important that they have continually tried to adjust the rules to try and make it so that the person going second can catch up. And that's because, just from a game theory perspective, you're deploying your resources, you're deploying your, cards that are going to help you win the game. You are doing everything before your opponent. And so, approaching Shatterpoint, I was like, well, the reason you don't get to score first must be because of how advantageous it is to go first. You're getting to move first. You're getting to take control of objectives. All other things being equal, if I get on the point first and I take control of that objective first, then that is going to be, harder for my opponent to take back because they have to commit twice as many characters to an objective as I have to if I've already taken the point. So that was my initial thoughts. And before I throw a counter out, what do you think, Todd? Where are you on this fence?
I mean, I think that like the idea behind that is correct. Where you're going first, you are the first one to sit there and take control of a point, so that you're the first one to be able to score. Like, so you're preventing that scoring from happening before your opponent can actually take play. To go ahead and get that scoring. So I understand the not scoring behind it. The issue is that you're really like the way that deployments are going to work, and the way that the current mission pack, and the only mission pack that we have, is best case scenario, you're only going to be scoring probably 2 points. It's like is all you're going to get out of it. You're really not going to be able to move your like any like a secondary unit or anything like that, like to the point where you're going to have them both on a point. Like potentially, maybe like with extra movement out of with jump jetpacks and things like that with Mandalorians, like depending on how you deploy them, it's entirely possible that you could. And I think is going to kind of circle back to that the turn zero stuff that we can talk about with that as well. But it's I don't know if it's as important, honestly, with at least this mission pack to sit there and not score first, because, like I said, best case scenario, you're going to score two, and then the opponent's going to be able to score two right back, possibly even three. So I don't know. It's interesting that how that plays out, but I don't know if it's that necessary, but it might be more necessary when we get more mission packs. Like they're talking about this, the Death Donut that we're going to be having in the next mission pack that comes out in less than a month now. How that's going, that might be different. Where it'll make a lot more sense why you don't score first, and you have to wait for the second player to score. So I want to reserve judgment based off of all of the mission packs that are supposed to be coming out, because they've been working on three at a time. So there's probably a very good reason behind it that we're not seeing quite yet. That because it does seem like it's a little bit more detrimental than it should be. But there's, like I said, there's probably reasons behind it based off of the other two mission packs that are potentially coming down the pipe.
Right, right. And just to clarify, when you're talking about scoring, you mean taking objectives, because the person who goes first doesn't score.
Correct. So
So,
like you go first, and you're
okay,
not able to
just making sure.
score, and then the second player is able to score. And I'm wondering if that's it seems like that it's pretty detrimental right now to not being able to score first. It seems like it almost puts you behind the eight ball to go first. Like you're behind by being the first player, but that might not be the case when we get these next two mission packs that are coming out. There might be a more of a balanced issue there, and that's why, because it doesn't seem like the balance is needed quite yet. But again, like I said, there might be a reason behind that we don't know yet because of the mission packs that are potentially coming.
Right, right. And I know, we're doing this Monday night, and they just put out a transmission about this new, what is it called? Sabotage Showdown, I think. is
Yeah,
that is that right?
that sounds right. I mean,
And
but there's not a lot of information in that we didn't already kind of extrapolate. I mean, it seems like it's kind of like the information that we already knew about already. Like that we were like the hive mind was able to sit there and extrapolate. Okay, it looks like this is what it's going to be, and it's just was more confirmation.
right, right. The only detail that I saw on that I thought was even close to being new is that, after moving the struggle token at the end of each turn, remove all priority objective tokens from active objectives. That seemed like the most surprising new piece of information. And I don't mean to go off topic, because this isn't actually what we wanted to talk about today. So I don't want to I don't want to delve into something that we don't even have the full details of.
Yeah.
But it does seem like that's something very significant that would change how the games play. But my counter, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't talking for too long, getting both of our thoughts. My counter is, and this is something that I definitely remember from, I'm pretty sure it was Zion's finest episode. If it's somebody else's episode, sorry. But there is that whole thought process of, okay, once your opponent has scored, so say, as you're saying, on average, the first scoring is usually only 2 points, unless they really spread out some supporting characters,
Hmm.
which I don't think is wise. But I mean, yeah, there in theory you could score three with like the Mandos and their jetpacks, and you separate your supports. But if you're most often scoring 2 points, well, now to get back to parity, your opponent has to score at least points, and that's just to get you back to zero.
Hmm.
And you have to score 3 points to get quote unquote ahead.
Yeah.
So there is that aspect of it that I would say is what creates the feel bad. It's that the player who goes first, it doesn't feel like you're really starting ahead. It feels like you're starting from a position of being behind. Like
Correct.
you're starting being behind, and the only thing I can think of is that it's very difficult, like in the early turns, unless you're activating somebody like Grievous or Maul, or someone who can just get all the way across the board. It feels like the first couple of activations, you're not really fighting. You are just maneuvering into position, and you're hoping to flip over cards where you're not getting, say, your best beaters. Instead, you're getting units with the high mobility so that they can get in and score points, and they're hunkering down. And this would be where I think my first strategic point would come is this is when I think reserving units is probably the most important part of the game,
Hmm.
is recognizing that you need to spend a force, and you really want to move. Like I think, and this is just my first thought, I think it's probably best if your secondary characters take the first objectives, right? Like they're moving in because they're a little tankier. They're not going to get beaten down immediately if a primary gets activated. Okay, yes, Vader Grievous, fine. But like they have a little more tankiness to them.
Yeah, I mean,
What do you think?
it's definitely been like your secondaries are usually what you're really wanting to have on your early activations. Like ideally, I mean, like especially looking at like if you're going to run the separatist list where you're running the super tactical droids, you definitely want them to go first just because of what you get out of them. Same with even the Vader Grievous moving the Django forward so that he's in the center of the board, or moving Kenobi forward, like Obi-2 forward, so that he's in the center of the board, so he can do his mind trick. So yeah, I mean, I definitely want to get the your secondaries activated early in the game, simply because they have a lot of utility for how the game is going to go, and positioning them or taking advantage of their different abilities definitely is the thing that really will set the tone for how your game is going to play out. And I think that in a way kind of even goes to the turn zero of deployment and decisions that you make on deployment, because you want to make sure that you have them when you are able to activate them, and hopefully you're activating them early. You have them deployed in a position to where you're going to be able to take full advantage of their positioning on the board. Like Django, you really want him in the center so you can not so fast, or you really want to have your Kenobi in that center area again so that he can mind trick an attack away or something along those lines. So the turn zero is very important of just where you're deploying, and making those decisions of how you deploy. And I think because we only have the one mission pack right now, people have gotten kind of dull to that idea, and I think we're going to have to start re-examining that. And I even started playing around with the status quo is okay. You have columns 1, 2, 3, and the left, center, right, or however you want to call it, and the de facto, this is how I'm going to deploy, is center, put one in between columns 1 and 2, and then put the other primary between columns 2 and 3, and branch out so you're touching each one of those. Well, and I don't think I don't know if you even noticed when I was deploying in our game where I was like, well, I'm going to play around with it. So I centered Grievous between 1 and 2, the columns 1 and 2, like, are the left and center, and so that I had people on those 2 points, and then I put Vader right on top of column 3, so he was straight ahead, so that he was not off center at all. He was directly behind the back column 3 point or whatever. and I don't know if you even noticed that, but that way I was running him right up that right column, so that and that's in a way almost like why I was able to win that our third struggle was because I had him in that position to like just kill right across the line there. So I think that's something that maybe start taking a look at. Is the status quo of deploying this center of of those three columns the right way to go, or is it because I was still able to maintain all three of the back points, and that's the reason why everybody's been deploying in the center. But is it necessary, and is that the right thing to do? Because it's like I said in our game, it was more of an exercise in the different way of deploying and trying something different. And I think for me, it felt I almost liked it better deploying that way.
So, dear listeners, I'm actually here just to pump Todd for all of his secrets so that everyone in our league has a better chance of beating him. That's the real reason why we're here. So hopefully you're all listening to the podcast. But no, I did not notice that. I should have paid more attention to your deployment. That's a so this is kind of why I wanted to have this episode is because I feel like we're already and I know this is gamers, like we want to meta, we want to know what's what so that we can start dealing with it. And it feels like yeah, we've gotten this consensus where you have to deploy in between the objectives so that no matter what you can maneuver across
Mm,
and deal with whatever the shatter pointless the deck gives you so
yeah,
that you can move across the board. But maybe we shouldn't be trying to do that so hard. That was the second thing we were going to talk about. We kind of just bled into it, but that's
yeah,
okay. Was making decisions on deployment because I do feel like we are just blithely putting everything so that we can cover as much ground. And I think you're right. I would agree that we need to start looking at what we're doing. Now, obviously, if you've got the bigger bases, you've got a little more ground that you can cover, sure. But that's something we really need to think about. The only thing I was going to add to deployment, and I know not everyone is playing on as much terrain as us because we've been adding our own, extra terrain
mm,
outside of what's coming in the core box. So we're playing on a little more. But I mean, if you have, and this is kind of like if you're playing Maul Mother Talzin specific, kind of, but like the Mother Talzin has the acolytes that can jump, whereas Maul I've often been running. Well, I have been running the Super Commandos, so maybe this is less of a point. But like my kind of thought process is pay attention to the terrain. If you have a group that has jump versus a group that doesn't have as much mobility, then you really should pay attention. And this is good for I guess the Vader Grievous players if you haven't figured it out. There is a little bit of mobility issues with Vader and his team. So you really want to pay attention to the terrain and put Grievous, who can climb wherever he wants, Mr. Scuttlebutt, uh, you want to make sure he's going where you're gonna need more climbs. Because Vader, yeah, you can get him on terrain, but it's not as easy. He's gonna be huffing and puffing by the time he gets to the top in comparison to Grievous.
yeah. I mean, definitely paying attention to where you're deploying your units that have jump, that have a scale, something along those lines, in comparison to where the ladders are. And I mean, part of that is we play with very few ladders. I think like most of our games, we only have 3 to 4 ladders on the table because we like the challenge of having that mobility issue. We like it not being easy to climb, and like adding that little extra ability to, or not even ability, that extra thought that needs to go into, okay, I want to move here, but I can't quite move here with a long move because there's not a ladder to climb. I need to put my, and so that adds to the deployment aspect of it, of what are your units capable of doing in their movements versus just being able to go put somebody here and go, well, he can climb up that ladder, he can move up here. Make sure you're looking at all of that and going, is there a way for me to get to this point if I activate this character? So there's a lot of that thought process that needs to go in, and just not mindlessly putting, okay, I'm right between 1 and 2 and right between 2 and 3, put my guys out, everybody's touching the places they need to touch. But actually looking at what are those units going to be doing when you actually activate them, and can you get them into the places that you may need to get them into.
Yep, yep. I completely agree with that one. So the next one that I wanted to talk about was moving forward to middle points because I feel like, all right, we just talked about secondaries. We want to activate secondaries early on, but let's be real. Sometimes you flip over a primary, you reserve it, and then you flip over a supporting unit, and now you're stuck activating the least happy
Advantageous, yeah.
option, right? So this is where, and this is me more of again. I'm just gonna apply Todd for secrets. I have just been, dealing the cards I've been handed, or playing the cards I've been handed. You got dealt a bad hand. All right,
There
I
you
know
go.
words. uh, and just moving my supports up. And
Mhm.
you know what has happened almost every time I have just moved my supports up because that's my only option. Somebody flips over Grievous on their side and murders them to death immediately. I don't know who that was, but someone out there.
I
So my
have been lucky
question
with that, yeah.
is, yes, yes, yes. So my question is there a case for maybe not just rushing in to score an objective in the middle? Is there a case where we should maybe let our opponent take an objective so that we can take it back later on? So and listeners, I don't have a clear answer to this. I don't know which is correct. We're just gonna hash it out right now.
And I don't think not taking the point is the right answer because you, if you put yourself too far behind from the start, you might not ever catch up. You know, if you're like, "Oh, well, I want to stay back enough." I think it's more along the lines of if you get that supporting unit and it's not the best supporting unit, finding ways to position them on the points and instead of moving them to where they're right at that middle point, maybe you're at the back farthest point away, and from where the point is, like you're at that level 2 away, like right at that very edge of where you're actually contesting the point. So I think that might be kind of important. The other piece of that though is when you're moving your characters forward and you're moving them to that center line and looking to where you're going to be placing them, take a look at, okay, which one of the characters for my opponent's characters have not activated at this point in time. Can they get how far, how what is it going to take for them to get to where my characters are, so that to take them out and flip that point. So positioning them in the most difficult way for your opponent to actually get to them and wound them and end up flipping the point. So I think that's one thing that a lot of people are overlooking at this point in time. So they're just moving them forward, going, okay, I'm on the point, and not thinking about how important that placement is from the start.
Yeah, and that was where I was kind of hoping this discussion would go because some of this is very well, some of this is very matchup dependent,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the thing you keep reminding me, you do not have to take your full movement. Just because you have a full advance does not mean that you have to go the full advance, and that could be the difference between, you know, one of these beaters. A lot of melee seems to be king right now,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can get on the objective but maybe just outside of, range 2 of whichever units they have, then that's probably a good thing. Whereas if they have a lot of ranged attacking, which doesn't feel like that's what a lot of people are playing with, but if they have a lot of ranged units with shoves on their tree, well, okay, maybe you do need to turtle up. And that's one of those decisions that I think in the moment we get stuck with, well, I want to be as close to the objective as possible because I don't want to get shoved off of the objective.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what else keeps you from having the objective? Getting wounded by Vader or Grievous.
I mean, but the other thing to keep in mind is I think this almost goes back a little bit to that turn zero of we're just mindlessly putting the characters out, going, okay, I'm going to deploy here, I'm going to deploy here because this is what I need to do, instead of actually going, okay, I'm putting this character out. Where is my opponent deploying their other characters, and how am I deploying in relationship to their things, so that I know when I move my characters forward. Maybe you don't want to have like your weakest supporting units opposite of Grievous because Grievous could make two moves to get up there, type of a thing. So it's a matter of looking at where your opponent is deploying in relationship to where you're deploying. It's something that I think people are not as much paying attention to at this point in time, just because they're new to the game. Coming from the MCP side of it, it's like that turn zero deployment thing was a pretty important lesson you learned early. But there's a lot of people that are jumping into this as the first game they've ever been playing, so they don't think about the whole deployment of like how does my deployment and my opponent's deployment impact how the first couple of turns of the game are going to be going. So I think that's something that lessons that are slowly getting learned by some of like people that are just new to miniature gaming.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I think. I know that I wasn't thinking. Well, as we just said, we were playing a league game. I mean, eh, not super competitive, but competitive. Like we paid money to enter an
Yeah.
event. It wasn't just a for funsy game. And I didn't even pay attention to your deployment. I didn't even notice that you had deployed, in a non-standard fashion, if we
Yeah.
want to call it that way. So, see, we have prime example of newbie mistakes. We're trying to help you, everyone. We're trying to help you. Don't do what I did, which was not pay attention to what my opponent was doing.
But yeah, I think that kind of like that kind of covers a lot of that middle point. And it's I think in our game, no, it wasn't this game. It was the game before where you had the Night Sisters. It was your first game playing with the Night Sisters. I mean, and you had put them in a point where they were able to sit there and actually jump into the point where they could actually secure 2 points in the middle on struggle one, and that's really what won you the game. Was you deployed them in a way that they were able to sit there and on their activation take 1 point and then flip another point in their favor and put you ahead. I think you ended up holding 4 points at that point in time on struggle one. So it was something that like really helped like with just knowing that getting to the middle point. I think that it was probably like your third activation or something like that, but it was a very impactful activation, taking those center points with the extra movement that you had out of the Night Sisters. And I think that's something to think about is when can I use that movement most optimally to take those center objectives so that I'm scoring the most points that I possibly can.
Man, Todd, you keep setting us up. It's like you've been doing this for a minute. That brings me to our next topic was how do we overcome the 3 point parity problem? And and I know that's complicated and there's some alliteration in there. Let me lay it out for you because this happened. This is why I didn't want to talk about my league game earlier, because this doesn't always happen with you and I, and I'm hoping you can help me break down why that doesn't happen. But in a lot of my other games, and at first I thought it was my stepson. He tends to play very defensively, and we get in these struggle ones where scoring 3 points, scoring 3 points, scoring 3 points, scoring 3 points. But that happened again in my league game on Saturday. He's playing, Dooku Grievous, very very strong list, everything you would expect. What B2 B well other than Savage, Savage, B2s, Magna Guards, and Django.
Mm-hmm.
Like pretty standard fare other than the Savage. And we still were in this, all right, I got three, you got three. I got three, you got three. And it wasn't until a key moment, and I don't remember what happened, but we got into a bit of a quagmire on the center point, and where I think I had the Super Commandos and Maul on that center point. I remember I had three characters, and his dice were not happy with him, and he was not able to shove him off. And that moment where he didn't flip that point over and he only scored two instead of three is basically where I started inching towards victory. So my question again is, has this been happening to you in any other games? And how do we overcome that? What have you and I been doing differently in our games where this hasn't been happening,
So I think
other than you murdering me?
well, I think part of it is like there's with newer players and part of like I think you kind of touched on it almost just with how your games with Parent go is somewhere people are playing defensively and they're just kind of making this huge quagmire around 1 or 2 points where it's impossible to sit there and flip a point because you have four different units sitting on or characters sitting on the same point. And I don't position my characters that way where I'm spreading out a little bit more, and that causes you to have to match the way I'm spreading out because I'm not focusing down on that one point. It's like, okay, you have three people on that point. I don't care about that point anymore. I'm going to go to the other points where I'm not having to fight over them as much. And I think there's a lot of players are just kind of moving to that. Well, I'm going to sit there and take that point. He's got all these people over here. I'm just going to take them all out. Where my way of looking at it is, okay, well, you have three resources tied up over on this point. I'm just going to avoid that and take the other points where you don't have resources, and I'm going to be able to easily or more easily flip that point in my favor. And I think that's where people kind of get lost in their idea of, well, I'm going to go back and try and take that point back because you just took it from me. Well, why? When I can just go over to this point where there's a weaker unit and I can just go and take that point and not have to worry about fighting all these other people over here. So I think it's more along the lines of what you're doing with your activations that are in those moments where you kind of sometimes we get blinders on to like what is going on. It's like, oh, you just attacked me, you just wounded my guy, I'm gonna go and get you back. It's like, well, do I need to, or can I just go over here and take this point, or can I just go over here and make it more difficult for you to sit there and flip flop back and forth? So sure, go ahead and hold on to that point. I still have my back point, I have the far right point, I'm gonna just go over and take the third point. Go ahead and hold on to that one for the time being, and now you're going to have to come over to me and deal with me over here instead. It's something along those lines where it's make your opponent bring the fight to you in your under your conditions instead of going to where they want you to go, type of a thing.
Ooh, ooh. All right, all right. I'm trying to see if I have a picture of this because oh, I've been taking too many pictures. Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. There was a moment, and I took a picture of this because it was driving me insane. We had on a single point Mother Talzin, Dooku, Grievous, Maul, and at least one Magna Guard,
See, and so
all on one point.
you're
And
putting
that
all of those
was
resources.
awful.
Yeah, you have your best
Awful.
resources. Both players have their best two resources on the same point. It's so I think there's you get the blinders on to like
Yep.
how you're playing, and you don't realize it's like I'm putting all of my resources in one place. Why am I doing that? And I think that's people lose track of that. Where you got to like, how are you going to best utilize our resources? Not just for that one turn, but going down because you're not going to flip them over again for another 3, 4 activations in some cases. So is that really where you want that piece to be after this activation until you refresh your deck again? And I think that's something that newer players just are not thinking about is what's the long-term effect of putting that resource in that position.
Yeah, yeah. So that's all right. That's a good thing. Now, the other thing again, and I know not everybody can buy the high ground pack. It's pretty expensive, and not everybody has a 3D printer. Although spoilers, everybody, mine's on its way back to the manufacturer because it's been having more problems, and I'm going to be getting a replacement soon. But anyway, maybe you don't have the money to get more terrain. However, it is you're getting terrain. But I do feel like that quagmire, like I'm not gonna hold my phone up to the because it's not gonna look good anyway. But that quagmire couldn't have happened with slightly more terrain. I
Yeah.
mean, if we had had a couple more buildings to set up, we had this empty gap because I thought I had two more buildings than I did in what I brought with me, and when I set up, I had these two gaps in front of us, and I'm like, oh well, whatever, like move on. So like terrain is one way to answer that. And then also, yeah, just making the strategic decision. I probably should have at some point said, nope, I'm not messing with that point. In fact, and I know this episode is about Struggle 1, and I'm trying not to dig into Struggle 2 and 3, but as I recall, on Struggle 3, all of those people were all on that point, and
Mhm.
I almost chose a card where that objective wasn't active anymore because I was like, you know what? I don't know if I want to commit yet more resources to this fight. Like there's
Yeah.
all the primaries are all on top of each other attacking one another. I ended up picking it and I ended up winning, but it was kind of luck. Like I was just lucky that I flipped Talzin early because she was wounded after that whole quagmire.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I again all I have to say is everybody keep listening to Todd. That's why you're here.
But no, I mean it's a matter of, like I said, it's kind of a matter of like looking at the long term effect, not the short term effect. And I think that's just miniature gaming evolution as a player is like you first start out looking at, okay, what am I going to do in this moment? How do I activate this in this moment to take the most out of it? But then taking that next step and going, okay, how do I get the most out of this activation and put myself in a position to where that's not going to be detrimental to me in later activations. And so it's just the evolution of just playing the game and learning different, like learning from your game and learning from playing. I mean, because you're just playing the games is like the only way you're really going to learn, and putting like different things into practice, going, okay, I'm going to try something different today. And like I said, like with our last game, I'm going to try deployment a little bit differently and see how that plays out, and see how that works out for me, and if that is something to take going forward as something different to do. So it's just a matter of finding those different moments and going, okay, well, here's something I did. It didn't work out that the way that I wanted it to. How can I change it? Let me try doing one thing differently, and just tweaking this little thing here, tweaking that little thing there, and making and seeing how it works out for you.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to me. And again, just kind of a little thing. I I don't want to talk down to anybody, but I have noticed sometimes that my opponents are surprised when I'm like, "Well, what cards are in your I don't know what we call it, discard
Discard
pile,
pile, yeah.
graveyard, discard pile." I'm like, "What is it from Magic?"
Yeah.
Uh, like I'm looking through their discard pile, going, okay, you got 3 cards left. All right, you've already used your Shatterpoint card. These are like I'm constantly there's very little hidden information in this game.
Correct.
I mean, about the only thing you're never gonna know is how your dice are gonna roll.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know where all the units are. You know where the objectives that are active. You should know what's in their deck. Okay, yes, turn 1, 2, everything is in their deck, but that's usually not when you're making these very key decisions. It's usually when, okay, what 2 cards are left in their deck? What do I need to worry about?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything else is where it's going to be on the table. It's not moving until they shuffle their deck again.
Yeah, all that information that's out on the board is public information, and you should be leveraging all of that information that's available to you to make the best decisions during your activation and for your placements and everything along those lines. That's so you can look and go, okay, well, you have Magnagard, Dooku, Grievous in your graveyard, so you know that the only way you're going to activate those 3 guys is with the Shatterpoint that's in their deck, so it's a matter of looking at making your decisions based off of what your opponent is potentially going to be doing in the future, which is kind of where I was going with that breaking parity, is that look at what they can possibly do with their next future activations and how that impacts what you're going to do on your current activation.
Right. And even the Shatterpoint card, it's not as much as of a wild card as you think. It's almost always going to be the most damaging primary. So look at the table and be like, okay, this is the most damaging primary that is going to hurt me. How can I mitigate that? I mean, it was a weird decision I had to make in our game where I knew I could score 2 points if I used my Shatterpoint card specifically to activate OB2 and to move him uh, away from my opponent's Django or into my opponent's Django. I don't remember exactly what, but it was a very specific circumstance where I was going to score an extra point by activating my secondary. Most of the time, you're just gonna pick Greater
Grievous?
Vader.
Greater Vader?
Greater Vader. Grievous and Vader had a weird baby. It's okay. Anything can happen in Shatterpoint. It's probably going to be one of their primaries,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like the primaries are the most impactful units. You're getting an extra activation of them. You can look at the board and be like, Grievous is about to kill my secondary. I wonder who they're going to activate with their Shatterpoint card.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, like, because your primaries are the ones that are usually going to be able to one-shot wound somebody. So you're definitely, I mean, that gives you an extra momentum. So that's more than likely the one that you're going to be using to activate on your Shatterpoint card, simply because of that reason. But again, that's information that you can probably just take from looking at the information that is available to you on the board, like looking at their discard pile, looking at where people are located on the board versus who's going to be coming up on activations, things along those lines.
Okay. So it sounds like we're getting to our last point, which is when to pivot to losing the struggle and planning for the next two, which I know nobody likes to do because it means you're losing, but I feel like that is part of this discussion of struggle one, because if you just keep trying to win struggle one after the parity is flipped against you, you're just going to be in a bad spot, right?
Yeah, I mean, a part of that comes to like the self recognition piece of it, of recognizing when you're at a point where I'm definitely not going to win this struggle, and where do I start moving myself to? And that comes to, again, looking at all of that information that is available to you. Like, who have I activated? Who do I have left to be activated? Who have my opponent activated? Who do they have left? Where are the pieces that haven't activated yet? Where are they positioned? Looking at all that information as a total and saying, can I, with the points that haven't activated, can I get them to the place to flip the points that I need to, or can I get them to a point to turn this in my favor, or do I just let this go and start moving them to the places that it matters the most to get them into a point where I know that this is the best place for them to be for winning struggles 2 and potentially struggle 3.
Right. And there's also decisions that you can make here where maybe slowing down the struggle so that your opponent is forced to use up their activations. Because if you can start the second or third struggle, and especially the third struggle, with your deck refreshed, shuffled, your force refreshed, all of that, if you can do those things, then I think you'll be in a better spot for struggles 2 and 3. And I mean, a lot of this is very much situational based on what's happening in the game as we're talking about it. But there's definitely situations where, for example, in my league game, when I knew I was ahead on struggle 1, and I also knew that I was going to lose struggle 2, just based on the card flip and everything. So I feel like there's a point where you've gotten over that parity. You know you're going to win struggle 1. We also know from how these games play out that you're probably going to lose struggle 2 unless things go really badly with the card flip. And so you can make decisions to try and drag out the struggle just a little bit. I'm not talking slow play or anything. I just mean you want to go into the next struggle hopefully with your deck shuffled, your force refreshed, so that you have maximum decisions as early on in the struggle as possible. And there are ways where if you're paying attention, you can just make the struggle, even though you're losing, work a little bit into your favor. And I feel like that's something that maybe people don't think about. You just keep thinking about, well, I got to try and take objectives. I got to try and take objectives. And, well, no, you've lost. Those objectives aren't going to matter in a couple of activations. So stop thinking about that.
Mm.
Start thinking about what can I do to make this as either costly for my opponent as possible, or no, that's basically it. How can I make this as costly for my opponent as possible? Can I get them to waste activations on finally bringing that train home?
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that I've noticed with like some players is they're losing struggle 1 and they flip over their primary and they're like, it doesn't matter. The next activation I'm going to win anyway. So they activate, they pull up, they flip their primary. They can put it into reserve, but they end up using that one to go and make an attack that has no bearing on the fact of that they're still going to lose no matter what they do with that activation. They're still going to lose when I activate next. And making that recognition of, okay, I flipped that over. Let me put this into reserve. Flipping over knowing that, I only have 2 supporting units left in my deck. I'm going to flip over that supporting unit, move it into a position that's better for the next struggle. Let me win that one, and then we go into struggle 2. And you know what? Now struggle 2, you're using Grievous right off the rip. So I think there's some of those things where it's like just understanding the state of the game when you flip that card over. And I think that's a biggest thing that people need to do in some cases is just have that recognition of here's the state of the game in this moment. Here's what I do with it type of a thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is basically just pay attention to where you are in the game. Pay attention to how your opponent deployed.
Yeah.
like basically there is very little hidden information, and I don't feel this way, but it seems like some of the chatter on the internet is that people don't like the variance of the card deck, and they don't like the variance of not knowing when you can activate. But I really think there's not as much variance as you think. I mean, as a Magic player, the number of times I've just needed one more land. Talk about variance.
Yeah.
Whereas in this game, we got 7 cards. Wait,
One
there
more
we
hand.
go.
There you
I
go.
know how to count 7. Yeah, there we go. One more. We got 7 cards, Todd. It's not that big of a deck. You got like what 2 out of 7 chances of getting any support, any secondary, any primary
Yeah.
that you could want, and then a 1 in 7 chance of whatever you want.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Like it's not as much variance as you think. You should be complaining about your dice, because I'm pretty sure the part of the reason why I won my league game is because his dice were not friendly to him at all the entire night. Like there were times where he was rolling a ton of dice and just nothing happened.
Yeah.
So talk to me about your dice.
Yeah, the variance of the deck is really not that big of a deal. It definitely compared to the dice itself. So, well, I think we're just about covered everything that we needed to. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up here for the night. As always, I do want to thank all of our listeners for listening on whatever podcast channel you are listening to. If you can, to help us out, just leave a rating on whatever podcast platform you listen to. It definitely helps us out. Go ahead, if you are watching us on YouTube, leave a comment. Go ahead and like that button, hit that like button, subscribe. Let us, that way you can sit there and see every time we get a new video that comes up. But other than that, I just again want to thank each and every one of you for listening. And as always, may the force be with you.
May the force be with you.